My ex-wife left me during my hospitalization, and now she wants my forgiveness. It's been 12 years. My name is Jason, and I'm 47. I'm writing to share my story and get some advice. This all started 12 years ago when I was married to Susan. She was my first wife. We were married for 7 years, and we had 2 kids, Laura and Lucas. They were 5 and 3, respectively. We were living a normal life, but one day, I was driving to my office when a speeding car hit me from the other direction. The next thing I remember is waking up in a hospital bed, covered in bandages and plasters. The nurse told me that I'd been in a coma for 2 days. I held my doctor's hand and thanked him for saving my life. I was grateful for the new life, but I had no idea about the disaster that was about to happen. After a week of treatment, my doctor told me that my lower body was paralyzed and that I might never be able to walk again. I was devastated. Susan was distraught when she heard this. It was obviously hard for her because she had to take care of the house and the kids. I fell into depression, unable to comprehend my life in a wheelchair. I spent my days staring at the empty walls of my hospital room, totally bummed out and hating how my life had turned upside down. I was really dreading not being able to play soccer with my kids or dance with my wife. I felt like I'd never be free again. To make matters worse, Susan stopped visiting me in the initial days of my stay. She brought the kids 3 times a week, and the moments I spent with my family were the only thing I lived for. But as the days passed, her visits became less and less. I begged her to get the kids. She said she didn't want to see me as often, but I felt so hopeless. Then one day, she gave me the divorce papers and said I couldn't be with a disabled man. She said I'm young and attractive and deserve a normal guy. I would be lying to myself if I was with her. I didn't think that was coming. I could tell she was starting to distance herself from me, but I didn't expect it to happen so quickly. A month after my accident, some friends told me they'd seen Susan hanging out with a middle-aged guy. I had a feeling, but I didn't think it would be so soon. A month after my accident, some friends told me they saw Susan hanging out with an older guy, probably in his 50s, in the cafes and malls during the evenings and on weekends. Some said she had an affair even before my accident, and others said her desperation led her to a fat, grumpy old man. After my accident, it was barely 2 months, and I was still in the hospital and hadn't been discharged yet when I was handed a divorce. I might sound calm writing this, but I wasn't. I was flustered, devastated, and heartbroken. I was wheelchair-bound, broke, and divorced with no income or savings after paying for Amy's household expenses and my kids' education. I couldn't think about saving. Luckily, I had insurance that covered my hospital stay. Papers. I might seem calm writing this now, but I wasn't back then. I was flustered, devastated, and heartbroken. I was in a wheelchair, broke, and divorced with no income or savings after paying for the Amy household and my kids' education. I couldn't think about saving any money. Luckily, I had insurance that covered some of my hospital bills. I had to liquidate my savings to cover the rest of the expenses, so in the end, I was left with nothing. I wanted to yell and curse my fate. I don't know how I kept my sanity back then, but something inside kept me from going crazy. Probably the fire of taking revenge after being discharged. I moved in with my parents' house. I was 35, divorced with no income, and dependent on my old mother physically and financially. My mother was a florist. She ran a small shop in the suburbs. The little income from the shop and the pension money kept her expenses afloat. With those limited resources, she offered to support me. It was the most troubling feeling for a 35-year-old woman. I was a 35-year-old man who was dependent on a 62-year-old woman. I was 35, divorced, and broke. I couldn't pay for a lawyer, so I didn't have one. My mother was a florist, and she had a small shop in the suburbs. The money she made from the shop and her pension barely covered her expenses. She offered to support me, but I didn't want her to. It was hard for a 35-year-old man to depend on a 62-year-old woman. Soon after my divorce, I went to meet my children. When I got to my house, it was locked. The neighbors told me Susan had moved to her lover's house with the children. According to my neighbors, Susan's lover was a fat, old man who had been divorced 3 times. He was filthy rich and had no children. Some even say Susan is a gold digger and cheapskate who slept with a grumpy old man for his money. I got the address of soon after I got out of the hospital. I went to see my kids. When I got to my house, it was locked. My neighbors told me that Susan had moved to her boyfriend's house with the kids. They said his name was Fat Old Man and that he had been divorced 3 times. But he was filthy rich and didn't have any kids. Some people even say that Susan is just looking for a rich guy to sleep with so she can get his money. I got the address of her boyfriend and went to his house. When I got to Susan's new place, she didn't let me meet my kids. She said the kids had already gotten used to her boyfriend and that he was like a dad to them. She said that if I showed up, it would be even more confusing for them. When I insisted on meeting my kids, she said she would get a restraining order. I didn't have any money to hire a lawyer, so I was getting by on my mom's small check. I asked her for some money, but she didn't have any. I was at Susan's new place when her boyfriend showed up. She wouldn't let me meet my kids, saying they were already used to her boyfriend and that he was basically their dad. She said that if I showed up, they'd be even more confused. I tried to insist on meeting my kids, but she threatened me with a restraining order. I didn't have any money for a lawyer, so I backed off. It was less than 6 months after my accident and only a few months after my divorce. She was already with a new guy. I felt gross. I asked her how she could just move on so quickly. I was a helpless, wheelchair-bound father, so what else could I do? I begged her for at least one chance to prove my worth. She put me down, saying I was a burden to her. I asked her if she cheated on me. I asked her if she cheated on me before the divorce, since it had been settled a month ago and she was already living with her new boyfriend. She told me it wasn't my business and that I should never show my ugly face to her. I kept staring at her, thinking about my 7 years of married life with the woman who replaced me with another man in a few months. I left the place with teary eyes, feeling defeated by the humiliation. I cried like a 5-year-old kid. Before the divorce, because our divorce was settled a month ago and she was already living with her lover, she told me that it wasn't my business and that I should never show my ugly face to her. I kept staring at her, thinking about my 7 years of married life with that woman who replaced me with another man. In a few months, I left the place with teary eyes. I went back home feeling defeated by the humiliation. I cried like a 5-year-old in front of my mother, who consoled me. She motivated me to take charge of my life. I was clueless about my life. I was directionless to start with. I joined my mother in her shop. I helped her make bouquets, serve the customers, and clean the shop. Soon, I realized that the business had a huge potential to grow, but my mother was too fragile to do it herself. I pulled out my old contacts to secure contracts with event management companies to supply flowers at the events. Gradually, I built a team and took contracts for venue decorations, and eventually, I started my own event management company. It took me 12 years to rebuild my life. My mother had my back the whole time. She supported me and motivated me to bounce back. A year after my accident, I found out that Susan was leaving the city with my kids and her boyfriend. I rushed to the house to meet my kids, but they had already left by the time I got there. Before that, I tried to reach out to my kids multiple times, but Susan insulted me and chased me away every time. Susan had full custody of the kids and I couldn't fight for custody because I was physically and financially incapacitated. I couldn't challenge her restraining order because I was too broke to hire a lawyer, and Susan had a wealthy boyfriend, Evan. I didn't know if he was already with her before my accident, and if not, how he suddenly appeared in her life. All I knew was that he was a wealthy man with a lot of ancestral property. Over the last 12 years, whenever I got any leads about my children, I traveled to meet them but failed every time. Susan threatened he could have gotten me arrested, but he didn't. That guy had the money and contacts to get away with anything. He didn't marry Susan even after 12 years, even though they lived together a year ago. I finally filed for joint custody. I was waiting for my event management business to get stable. I filed for custody and finally got 15 days. They're flying next week to my house. Susan did her best to object to my plea court, but I hired a good lawyer who presented my case well, and I got 15 days. Besides, my children are grown. I just got the update that UPS is coming to pick up the kids. They asked if they wanted to meet me, and they said yes. I know I can't make up for the lost 12 years, but I really want to spend some quality time with my kids before it's too late. I'm feeling a bit nervous, but also excited. They're 17 and 15 now. I know teenagers can be demanding, but I hope they're not mean or toxic. I don't know what Susan has told them in the last 12 years, and I'm not sure if I should tell them the truth about their mom. Do you guys have any suggestions on how I should approach this? Then I was pretty nervous and excited. Update. Hey everyone, I've got a lot to share. I realized I forgot to mention a couple of important things in my last post. First, about my wife Amy. Yes, I got remarried 5 years ago. Amy's an interior designer. I met her at an event where she was designing the wedding venue, and we were providing the flowers. I wasn't yet starting my own company at that time. We weren't exactly love at first sight, but we got along well. We kept running into each other at events like that for the next few months and became friends. She was a single mother of 3. It was her idea to start an event management company. She'd worked for one of the companies for years, so she had the contacts and knowledge. I partnered with her to launch the business. We dated for a year before getting married. Now we're a happy family of 4. Amy, her daughter Mia, and me. Amy, my daughter, came up with the idea to start an event management company because she worked for one of the companies for a long time and had the contacts and knowledge of the business. I partnered with her to launch the business. We dated for a year before getting married. Now we live as a happy family of 4. Amy, her daughter Mia, and my mother. My daughter, Amy, was the one who came up with the idea to start an event management company because she had worked for one for a long time and had the right contacts and knowledge. I decided to partner up with her to launch the business. We dated for a year before getting married. Now we're a happy family of 4. Amy, her daughter Mia, my mother, and me. Her daughter was thrilled to get a grandma, and so was my mother. The second piece of information was about accident compensation. I was hit by a speeding truck, so ideally, I should have been compensated by the logistics company that owned the truck. But at that time, the company got away with paying nothing by manipulating the facts. My mother and her daughter were thrilled to have a grandma, and I was happy to have her. The second piece of info was about accident compensation. I was hit by a speeding truck, so ideally, I should have been compensated by the logistics company that owned the truck. But at the time, the company got away with paying nothing by manipulating the facts about the accident and blaming me. I couldn't hire a good lawyer back then, so I didn't get a penny. You know how big companies work. They pay big bucks to their attorneys to save their backs. After my marriage with Amy, she suggested I refile the case since we could afford a suitable lawyer. The case is still in court, but my lawyer has the accident and blaming me. I couldn't hire a good lawyer back then, so I didn't get a penny. You know how big companies work. They pay their attorneys big bucks to save their backs. After my marriage to Amy ended, she suggested I refile the case since we could afford a suitable lawyer. The case is still in court, but my lawyer has given us a positive hint that the judgment would come in our favor. All right, coming back to my story, as I mentioned in my original post 3 months ago, my children were supposed to visit me after 12 years of my divorce. I was excited and nervous, but Amy calmed me down and supported me all this while. I went to pick them up from the airport. The older one, Laura, is 15 now, and the younger one, Lucas, is 13. They have grown up to be beautiful and handsome teenagers. After the initial greetings, we ran out of conversations. It was awkward. On the way to the house from the airport, I tried to get the kids talking about their school life and city. I deliberately avoided talking about their mom. They didn't bring up their mom either. The kids were unusually quiet, or maybe they were just using their earphones like any other teenager. When we got home, Amy greeted us. The kids looked shocked, like they weren't expecting her. I don't know why Amy was a surprise to them, since her mom could live with us. So, a few months after our divorce, I started dating someone else. I mean, why can't I remarry? Amy set up the guest room for the kids, we had lunch, and she even laid out the vacation itinerary we had planned for the family. They were pretty neutral about everything. They weren't excited or dismissive of the plan. Amy and I were confused by their mixed response. They locked themselves in their room, and soon after that, I got a call from their mom, Susan. She accused me of tricking our kids. She said it brought the kids to my house, so Amy and I could have played them, but her behavior made me feel all mixed up. She said I was lying about my marriage, and I was like, what the heck? I hung up on her, but she kept calling. I figured I'd better deal with the issue, so I called my kids and asked what was up. After a little hesitation, they spilled it all. They were mad at me, 'cause Susan had been telling them I'd left them. She'd brainwashed them against me, filling their heads with all kinds of lies and stuff. So I just spilled the truth. It wasn't Elle's mom who jumped to another man as soon as she got the chance. They were kids back then, but they remember those incidents very well. I told them how Susan disappeared with them to the old man's house and how she had threatened and chased me away whenever I tried to contact them. I showed them the restraining letter and all my rejected pleas to meet them. They were in tears and regretted believing in their mom's lies all these years. My younger son, Lucas, admitted that once he tried to reach he came out to me on social media, but Susan caught him. She emotionally blackmailed him and got him to promise he'd never contact me again. The kids also said Susan's husband had scolded them. Susan and the kids were mistreated at family gatherings because they weren't married. Susan continued to stay as a mistress in his house, even though he paid for their education. He was never a father figure to them. My heart ached as I got to know about my kids' adversity. After all the truths came out, we all hugged and cried a lot. We went on a week-long vacation in Florida and had a great time together. Laura and Lucas bonded with Amy and Mia, who was turning 8 that year. I couldn't be happier to see all my family together. My kids uploaded our group photos to social media and captioned them, "Happy Family." As soon as Susan saw the photos, she called them and berated them for their foolish behavior. She blamed them for betraying her by bonding with us. She even texted me, threatening that she would not let me meet I'm not sure how much of an impact I had on my kids' relationship with her, but I know I made them mad by laughing at her empty threats. I told them to go on vacation with my relatives, and they did. When they got back, my relatives were happy to host them, and I was happy to see that they were still close. They promised to keep in touch, even though Susan was threatening them. They said they felt suffocated living in that house, and they were planning to move back with me after they finished high school. I hugged them and said goodbye. I asked Susan about her evilness, but she turned the tables on me, accusing me of manipulating them against her. It's been a few months since they returned, but we talk regularly. I hope to have them back with me. I'll update you if anything develops. Thanks a lot. Update 2. Hey all, I know it's been a while since I updated. There's been a lot of drama in the last 6 months. After my first meeting with my children 3 months ago, the impending court case with the logistics company got settled. Guess what? I got hefty compensation. I'm not sure if I mentioned this in the initial trial, but the logistics company whose truck rammed into my car manipulated the case and pinned the blame on me for the accident, so I wasn't compensated at all. I appealed it again at my wife's suggestion and won this time. I told my kids, and they were equally elated. They wanted to meet me, and I promised to have them back with me permanently a month later. Susan showed up at my office, held my hand, and she asked me for forgiveness, and I was surprised by her sudden confession. She said that after my accident, she had become desperate and found an older man who wanted a sugar baby. I didn't know what any of that meant, so I Googled it. The man had a few bad experiences with younger women who ran away with his money after a few months, so he decided to settle with a not-so-young sugar girl. Susan, who was 32 at the time, had 2 children, which he saw as a guarantee of her loyalty. The man had made it clear that he decided to marry her, but then decided not to share the inheritance with my kids. He promised to feed and fund their education, so Susan agreed to his terms. I asked her why she didn't get a job, and she said she had never worked and wasn't sure if she could earn a similar lifestyle. She said her lover gave her that lifestyle for free. She kept saying that she did everything to protect the children's future. She said that the children would have grown up in poverty if she hadn't taken that step. I got so annoyed. When she started nagging, I got mad and yelled at her. I told her that if she was so worried about our kids' future, she should have talked to me about it instead of jumping to conclusions and leaving me without any warning. I told her I was moving on, and her begging didn't matter. She started talking about all the good times we had, like our wedding day, the birth of our 2 kids, and so on. I just shrugged and said I was a different person now and all those memories were gone. But they weren't. She said a lot. She crossed her line when she said that my kids and I were my original family and not Amy and Mia's. She even said that Mia wasn't my daughter and that I could never have a proper family with Amy and Mia. I felt disgusted by her cruel words. She insisted that I'd take her back so the real family could reunite. I made it clear that I love Amy and Mia, and that they are my real family and not hers. She refused to leave my office, creating a scene. She only left when I threatened her with the police. I went back home and told my mother and Amy. Amy was pretty upset by this, but she's a mature woman and didn't make a big deal out of it. My mother said she never liked Susan because she's selfish. Mom even said that Susan came back to me only because of the money I received after the court settlement. That woman is a real gold digger. When my kids learned about their mom's behavior, they berated her and told her to stay in her lane. I'm not sure how her sugar daddy got to know about this incident and threatened to throw her away if she reached out to me, and I'm really grateful to him. The latest update is that my kids are moving in with me this month. They'll stay with us for a bit before I enroll them in a nearby college. They want to enjoy their college life and stay at a hostel. I think we should stay connected, but also give ourselves some space to get to know each other. The kids have ditched Susan, and in the end, she's left with nothing but her sugar daddy. I hope she enjoys the sugar until it's not so sweet. Haha.